Hello, welcome to the Wargamer. I'm your host, Rob. I'm joined by the Twitch chat. You can see them here. All these absolute legends. It's Friday, and we're talking about some of the releases and some of the content that came out from Adepticon, which is pretty exciting. If you're an Age of Sigmar stan, as I am, I fucking love that game. Swore at the first start of the video, so no monetization for me. I love this game. It's the best, right? It's a cool game. It's an incredible community, and it's wicked, right? So that's how I feel about the game. I think it's really great. Does it have problems? Sure. It does have problems, but life has problems, right? And it gives me enough joy. So they put the roadmap out, and there's some really exciting stuff in here, and there's also some really interesting stuff in here, which I really like. So first up, we already know the Blades of Khorne and the Hedonite Slanesh book is already out. It's weird that it's on a roadmap when it's already come out, but that's fine. I've reviewed both of those. You can go check those out on YouTube. They're both pretty interesting books. The Khorne one's weird. You would expect Khorne to be a really heavy melee-orientated army, and it is because it doesn't have a lot of shooting units, but it's weirdly tanky in a way that it probably shouldn't be, which is odd. And it's also very techy, which is odd as well. But that's not to say it's a bad book. It's got loads of mechanics, but it might not play how you would necessarily expect Khorne to play. Slanesh, on the other hand, is an interesting book with a number of abilities that really overlap to create potentially some really negative play experiences. But it also has a lot of like fun tech that you could potentially put in together. That said, it's fairly linear, and weirdly, the Keeper of Secrets, much like the Bloodthirsters, aren't particularly good, and that's kind of odd. Like the big greater demons don't really work in it, so I find that really weird. But they're both very interesting books, and I think people are going to have loads of fun. I especially like, out of the Hedonite Slanesh book, the Temptation Dice. I think that's an incredibly cool mechanic that people will enjoy. Maybe it'll get old in 3 years. I don't know. It's pretty cool. And the Murder Rolls for Khorne. Okay, so that's the stuff we already know out the way, which is fun. Now we get into all of the stuff they revealed at Adepticon. So they showed us 2 new battle tomes, one for Ossiarch Bone Reapers, one for Soulblight Gravelords, which is pretty interesting. Soulblight Gravelords has had a fairly recent book. It was the last book before the new edition of Age of Sigmar 3. The army itself has been doing okay. It was a fairly well written book, actually. It kind of, in hindsight, there was lots of really fun stuff you could do with it. There were multiple different builds. You could run loads of zombies, which was really fun. Graveguard kind of stood out as this incredible piece. Manfred stood out as this incredible piece. Blood Knights were really cool as well once they got FAQ'd to work properly. So overall, like, quite a cool book with lots of good internal balance. Lots of stuff kind of worked, which was really fun, especially a lot of the characters. You had Radikar, you had Manfred, you had Belladama. So that was actually, like, it was an interesting book, and it has quite a lot of war scrolls and a lot of ways to really run it. But that said, it also had a bunch of stuff like Kritzer, which kind of didn't really make it into lists. It's quite top heavy character wise, with a lot of them, a bit like Stormcast, where a lot of them don't really work. We have seen that there's a new foot vampire. So to add to that top-heavy amount of characters, we have had, as we've had for all of Age of Sigmar 3, another single-foot hero and a new bot and a new single-foot hero and a new book. So it's kind of like where I'll be a lot on this. Like, Age of Sigmar 3 has been a bit of a rip if you've been an Age of Sigmar 3 fan. All we've mainly got is single-foot heroes. A lot of the armies that really needed and really wanted to get new units, like KO and Fire Slayers, as an example, and OBR. OBR having some sort of like skeleton archers would have been very cool. I would have really liked to have seen skeleton archers for those. We've just had all these single foot characters and then a new book. Games Workshop is a bookmaking company it's a money making company more than anything else, but they like selling us books very often and very repeatedly. And Age of Sigmar hasn't had necessarily loads and loads of releases. That said, though, in a 3-year window, it's quite interesting. We got Cruel Boys all released, new Stormcast, Slaves to Darkness, and looking forward into the year, we actually have a lot of releases. So I'm a little bit torn by being like a one-book stan. If you're an Age of Sigmar fan, there's loads of stuff that gets released all the time. If you're like a one-book person, like if you're like, Rob, I like Khorne, bosh. And I'm like, okay, cool. You got to wait another 3 years till those Bloodthirsters, maybe you'll see it on the tabletop. And that's rough. That's pretty rough. And same with OCR Bone Reapers. They've got a limited roster. They've got an incredibly cool background. One of my favorite armies because they actually look like an army on the tabletop. You've got ranked infantry. You've got heroes. You've got a big monster god hero if you want. You've got artillery. You've got heavy cav in the Morghasts. You've got heavy infantry in your Stalkers and your Immortal Guard, Immortal Guard, whatever. And they're cool. They're super cool. But it would have been nice to have had a couple more units in my personal opinion. No chariots is sad. No archers is sad. But a new book and hopefully and importantly new rules because OBR have not really been able to play the game. Don't forget, as we get to summer, we talk about that in the roadmap, we'll be in the very last year of Age of Sigmar 3. So we're coming into the end of the second year and on a 3-year cycle. So this OBR book and Soulblight Gravelord's book or Seraphon and City's book will be books. In fact, in the City's case, it'll be a book that will be valid for less than a year. So that's just something to be conscious of before you spend any money on it. So that's OCR Bone Reapers. Would I like to see new units? That's not really the trend at the minute for Age of Sigmar. It's a bit of a shame. Really excited to see some updated narrative. That'll be really fun. But unfortunately, no new and some awesome new rules, which is good because OBR's a fantastic army. And it's sort of like Gravelards. No new Graveguard is weird. I find that odd. We got lots of updates for models, but we haven't had new Graveguard. I find that very weird. Feels like they're sat on that for Gravelads. Yeah, Soulblight Gravelads is their new name. Soulblight Gravelads. Nothing new for them. That's weird. I don't know what's going on there. But it's a big range. Like we got the new vampires, like Luke of Eye and all that. When it was initially re-released like 2 years ago. It's a fairly new book to get re-released. KO did need new units. I already said that. Yeah. But again, maybe giving them an update rules-wise, a refresh. I actually don't know what Soulblight Gravelords need in a rules refresh. Maybe a more competent spell lore. I would have liked to seen some vampire heavy infantry. But ultimately, exciting that there's a new book. But I don't necessarily think it needs a new book. But there we go. All right, moving on to the summer. Okay, and this is where it gets super interesting. So the summer, we've seen Seraphon, and we know there's a whole new range release for Seraphon. If you're an Age of Sigmar fan already, then, by the way, you don't need me to tell you this, but Seraphon, when they were released, ruined the game. Ruined it. Absolutely totaled the game. Flipped it on its head, and then basically dry humped it for 2 years. That's effectively what Seraphon did. So the release of a new Seraphon book, while the miniatures are fantastic, there's a whole bunch of new miniatures. There's a whole bunch of new miniatures. Which all look great. New Saurus Guard look particularly epic. Saurus Guard weren't really good. What made the Seraphon good, Rob? Okay, well, Croak was incredibly good. They had a very dominant magic phase where they could spellcast from range. They worked incredibly well as a castle that could push into the midboard and do offensive amounts of damage without dying. There were Skink builds that absolutely dominated the meta. Then there were Salamander builds that absolutely dominated the meta. Then there were Bastillodon builds that absolutely dominated the meta. And they defined the meta in many ways. So there's a whole new release on the stuff that didn't see a lot of play. Saurus, you didn't really see get played much. There's new Saurus. Slan, you always saw played. There's a new Slan. That's cool. You rarely saw the Carnosaur see it into competitive lists or really on the tabletop at all. And now we've got kind of mid-cavalry Varangard-sized Saurus riding little Carnosaurs, which is super cute. So that's really fun. Ultimately, I think it's going to be probably as popular as Slaves to the Darkness, Gits, and Seraphon. They're in that kind of territory along with Sylvaneth, which are wildly popular. Just absolutely wildly popular. So they're going to be, it's going to be interesting. We should talk about the cover art a little bit because this is the point where we could do that. Cover art, as has been pointed out by the chat a lot, is pretty trash for Seraphon. I'm just going to put it out there. Age Sigmar 3 started out with a kind of a gritty imagining. The first Age of Sigmar was quite cartoonish in its release. The art especially. And art drives a lot of Warhammer content and tabletop content, in my opinion. A lot of the front covers, a lot of the art we see really drives what we kind of picture in our minds. And so it started out that it was very gritty, very much like the Blades of Khorne book. Blades of Khorne book makes a lot of sense. I'm like, oh, that looks like an Age of Sigmar 3 battle tome. But the Heat Knights Slanesh one really doesn't. The OCR Bone Reapers one is kind of weird because they've done this odd like effect over the top. So that's the original artwork, gritty, lots of like line drawing, like nice and visceral. But unfortunately, they've then added a load of effects over the top of the OCR art, and it looks a bit naff, in my opinion. Soulblight Gravelords is just a copy and paste from the old Soulblight Gravelords art, which is also really weird because they've done that a couple of times over this edition as well. That can definitely add to the feeling, and it definitely adds to my feeling, that this is just another way of cycling another £30. That's I'm in England. Another £30 out of the consumer. I'm pretty much anti-buying the books. If you're buying them for the rules. If you're buying them for the lore and the art, you should absolutely buy them because they're cool. There's loads of great stuff in there, and it really makes you feel a part of the army you collect. If you're buying them for the rules, they're available for free pretty immediately online, and I would never just buy them for the rules because you're then just giving Games Workshop the idea that they can just sell you very similar to almost non-updated rules for £30 every X amount of time, and that feels like you're taking yourself for a mug there. Seraphon will be all new rules. So art is weird on some of those cases, and in some cases just a copy and paste, which is weird. Don't forget, I really like this game. Criticisms are because I like it, and when the stuff doesn't work for me, you also get to say that as well. Liking a thing does not mean the thing can never have something bad said about it. That's fine. Right, okay, what's this book here? Oh my god, that is going to be our Thondir book. Thongdir, if no one knows what Thongdir is. We had an incarnate released, sometimes known as the Bincarnate, which was an incarnate, the incarnate of Gur, was released. And that was released alongside a Thondir book, or a campaign book, which really kind of set the scene for our 2 seasons in Galette. Or 3 seasons in Galette, actually, which has kind of been the narrative metaverse in which our games and stories have been told over the past, since Age of Sigmar 3 launched, really. So Thongdir is kind of like a bestiary of the realm of beasts and a bunch of stuff. It's actually quite a cool book. Just to be honest, it's a better book than, some of the other books, because it's just all basically new content, and that's quite rare nowadays. I haven't done this analysis, but it would be very interesting to see how different the He Knights Slanesh narrative is, or Soulblight Gravelords narrative is, to the one that they just released. No one's done that in the community, but I imagine, the change isn't significant, especially for 30 quid, is all I'm going to say. Thondir is just narrative jazz. Thondir is narrative jazz. Ultimately, all of these games are, all of these rule sets, which is what these books are to a lot of us, especially gamers like me, are ensconced, great word of the day, high five chat, in the meta-narrative that we play it in. And that adds to the game, in my opinion. It doesn't detract from the game. It's an attractive part of the game. You get to add fun, new kind of stories in your head with the dice rolls and everything else. So I quite like that. But that's going to be the Thondir. And that actually will be a book I pick up. Depending on how big it is, but that actually will be a book I like to kind of follow on with my thought process. That's a book that I want to buy, because that's a book that I think is going to be it's going to have a load of lore and a load of story, which I really want, and I think that'll be fun. So that'll be one I pick up. That also will coincide with the release of a new incarnate of Gur. We're hearing it's a bone spider. That's what we're hearing so far. That's the rumor. So great. General's Handbook in the summer. So, General's Handbooks are the kind of the match play season rules that you play every 6 months. We've got 6 months left on that. We've got 4 months left on that, sorry. It kind of feels weird to see the General's Handbook on the release map when people are still wrestling with this GHB. People are just finding their feet in this General's Handbook, and then it feels very weird to see the new one lined up on the timeline, for me personally. I don't know what anyone else thinks, but yeah. But General's Handbook is on there. So that'll be new battle plans. Well, maybe only half new battle plans. New rules, maybe only half new rules. That's definitely one that I would encourage you not to pick up. It's always freely available online. It is just a rules supplement, and I don't think that's of any value to you as a gamer. Ultimately, people they can Several of the battle plans in this GHB, for example, are pretty much non-goers. People don't really use them in events, or even maybe in friendly casual games, because they actually warp the game state so much that they're not very fun. I'm just going to put that out there. They're not designed well. They're the maps in which you put your toys. And these haven't been done very well. I wouldn't say this one was worth 30 quid. I definitely wouldn't say the next one's worth 30 quid, or however much it costs. So the general handbook, so just skip that. But is that going to be for 6 months or a year? So there's rumours that we might be going back to a year-long cycle versus a 6-month cycle. So that'll be quite interesting to see, especially when that general handbook come out. That'll coincide with it only being a year left on Age of Sigmar 3 going into Age of Sigmar 4. I'd love to know what the chat thinks and you think about it being a yearly versus 6-month cycle. 6 months does feel short when you look at a roadmap and you know that in 4 months' time the edition changes. So that feels weird. Right, okay, and then in autumn we have the new Cities of Sigmar book, okay, which is very exciting. And it looks like potentially that's going to be our Flesh Eater Courts release. How do we know it's Flesh Eater Courts? How do we know there's new Flesh Eater Courts models? Well, we already saw a Flesh Eater Courts model at Christmas. We also saw a Flesh Eater Courts set of units, or a new updated set of Flesh Eater Courts units in the new Warcry box set, which has been leaked, which looks very cool. So we're pretty certain that that's new Flesh Eater Courts with a big range refresh, as it's one of the only ones that's left. So that's pretty much what we think that is. Obviously, that could be something else. But I think that that's going to be that. And then Cities of Sigmar is our new Cities of Sigmar. Originally, it was called the Dawnbringer Crusade, or announced to be the Dawnbringer Crusade. I don't know if Cities of Sigmar is a working title, or if we're actually going to get Cities of Sigmar. I'm going to have a speculation chat about that in a bit. But that's pretty cool. I like the models. Really like the models. I think that Cities of Sigmar should become the faction for Age of Sigmar. Like, that should be your buy-in faction. So you turn up, every story should be based around Cities of Sigmar and not the Stormcast Eternals. That's kind of my hot take. I think Stormcast Eternals are too far removed from the humans, especially in a fantasy setting. Maybe when you're looking at a sci-fi setting like 40k, it's quite an exciting place to talk about, like, transhuman space fascists, which are the Space Marines. In before someone says, actually, it's a theocratic state. They're fascists, mate. Like, just fucking suck it. Right, but Cities of Sigmar is an eclectic, powerful kind of set of stories that you can tell from a range of different humans integrating with loads of different races, at war with those different races, and ultimately humanization is something that works really well in fantasy, in my personal opinion, and will look good. What am I excited about for Cities of Sigmar? Literally fucking everything. I always like the lads of the realms, just the lads. I think that's good, and I'm really looking forward to seeing all their sculpts. I think it's going to be really interesting. I'm really hoping that they focus on, like, I hope they don't do a bunch of weird war machines and that's kind of the army. I instead hope it's just a load of, like, halberdiers, swordsmen, crossbowmen, just a bunch of just absolute nonsense lads just trying their best, having left the village, off to war. The lads of Sigmar, that's kind of what I'm hoping. And ladies, obviously. The ladies of Sigmar as well, of course, and everyone in between. I just want them to have a good time. That's what I want to say. Fighting against... I want campfire stories. I want a couple of humans sat around a campfire, yeah, helmets down, being like, see the size of those dinosaurs? Fucking tell me about it. They are massive, those dinosaurs. They were huge. I can't believe it. I pooped myself when I saw that dinosaur come out of the forest. I know. It was insane. Did you see the horde of zombies? I did see the horde of zombies. That was madness. That's what I want. I just want everyone hanging out, right? Just being chill. Just in grace, and that should be the Age of Sigmar 3 faction. And that's my hot take: is that Age of Sigmar 4 and Age of Sigmar going forward should be Cities of Sigmar central. Stormcast should not be the poster child of that game system. I think it should be Cities of Sigmar or Gloomspite Gits, one of those two. So that's the roadmap. So that's everything that's coming up, which is pretty exciting. The positives: Games Workshop are doing a roadmap. That's actually really brilliant for us as consumers. I've been pushing for this for a long time. Games Workshop actually started to do it. It's actually brilliant. It's like very, very good. Like it's the most basic shit. I know. If you're new to Warhammer and Age of Sigmar and you're listening to me talk, you can understand just kind of the hostage mentality that I have as an Age of Sigmar fan, where looking at something like this and be like, oh, they give us a roadmap. It's like the most basic game shit that people do. But Games Workshop have started to do it now, and that's actually really exciting. So I'm pretty keen on that. So overall, pretty fun for me, especially as we're going to be getting a huge Seraphon release and a campaign book during the middle of, and the GHB during the middle of the 40k release. So 40k 10th edition will take up most of Games Workshop's marketing, most of Games Workshop's kind of like chat. So that'll be a huge portion of what they talk about. And so it'll be very cool to actually get our own little corner of the world while the hordes of Warhammer fans are processing and dealing with that. We just kind of be like, oh, a bone guy. Just get to read about that. Just get to read about some Thongdir bestiaries, some flora and fauna in the realms. That'd be really fun. Okay, so those are all my thoughts. I'd love to know what everyone thinks. Talk to me, tell me. Love you all. Hope you enjoyed this vid. And chat, I want to hear what you've got to say right now.